Yeah, g'day, I'm Dave. I'm from Seattle. We're going to talk about low fast and stay fast. Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I have a dumb dog, and I work for Outdoorsy, which we'll talk a little bit more about. I want to go through our app, use our app as an example of what we're trying to do with trying to make our site as fast as possible. And I'll try and explain why. I'm also, so this is basically the agenda. We're going to talk about the tools of yeah.
Can you explain your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle?
Yeah.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Okay.
That's very good though. So we're going to talk a bit about the tools of the trade. What do we use to make our site go as fast as we can? I'm going to show a little bit of the testing stuff around that as far as in browser, how fast are we actually going. I'm going to introduce Outdoorsy a bit. I'm going to show you a little bit of how we're doing it, and I want, as you guys can ask as many questions as you would like. I don't mind showing you anything. We'll show you what's going on for us. But first, I'm from New Zealand. So does that explain my handle?
Yes. You got the Kiwi part.
You got the Kiwi bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we'll try and figure out the rest as we go along here. So, how many people have been to New Zealand? How many people know where it is? Okay. You know, when I first came to the States, some guy asked me, I really want to go visit. He was like a college-educated American man. He said, I want to go visit Norway and Sweden and New Zealand. And I was like, that's... So I'm going to explain a little bit about New Zealand. So we're called Kiwis, and it's because of the bird, not because of the fruit. When I was a kid, they were called Chinese gooseberries. And then some Kiwi invented this thing. Why don't we just call them Kiwis? So in New Zealand, we call them Kiwi fruit, because we don't want to be... This bird is really special to us. So that's one thing. We also have... This is the New Zealand flag, and this is the Australian flag. We tried really hard to replace it, and John Oliver gave a shit for it. Which because it's, yeah. One of the things that I really like about New Zealand, one of the phrases we use is this phrase called sweet as. And I've got in trouble for saying that in America. You know, when you're out for dinner with someone and that you say that was sweet as, or someone does something really great and you're like, that's sweet as. Or you can actually use the as bit with other things. You can say that was mean as, and that can be bad or good. Mean is bad or good. So, and you can use choice as well. You know, it's like sweet as your mama's cooking, or sweet as whatever you want to put there. Why do we need to put anything there? So you're welcome to use that. This is how we make pizza in New Zealand as well. This is how we made pizza when I was growing up. I don't know, can you see it on there?
Is that spaghetti?
It's spaghetti, yeah. It's like a can of spaghetti on the pizza, and then cheese and some pineapple and a little bit of like ham maybe. And this is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. His name's Bill English. He was making pizza for his 10 kids. And he thought he would put this up on Instagram. But recently, we just elected a woman Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and she just had a baby like 3 days ago. So she's taken 6 weeks off to have her baby, and then she's going back to work. The first leader of a nation to have a baby for quite a few years. The last one was in Pakistan. And then one more thing I want to show you. There's a few things that are going on in here. One is, it's a little bit of the town that I'm from. I lived in this little town called Browns Bay, and this is a TV commercial, and it was filmed there. And there's also a little bit more about swimsuits and why, and some things around that. I'm just going to play it and let you guys figure it out, and we can talk about it.
Simplifying summer. How far away from the beach do togs become undies? Skin-tight swimming togs, an item of clothing you'd happily wear in public, but not in public. So how far is too far? Let's begin. Togs, 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 undies, undies, undies. Consider water, you're in underpants. Local supermarkets. Buildings, public transport. Underpants transformation areas. We trapped the budgie smuggler with respect undies, togs.
So, New Zealand's really that beautiful. That my brother has a restaurant just on that, it's called Browns Bay, is that little beach where they filmed all of that, and that supermarket's there, all that stuff is right there. My brother named his cafe Beach, so has some wicked SEO issues. It's really been an issue. So just to recap, here is, we are Kiwis because of the Kiwi bird. New Zealand is not Australia. And bats are sweet as in Austin. And you go swimming in togs. Yeah, so you got to, okay. So just back to the whole deal here is we're going to talk about the tools of the trade here. I'm going to look at outdoorsy. We'll open up stuff and have a look. And I'll show you some of the stuff about how we're trying to go fast. And some of the issues around that. So the requirements for us is we need... I should just say a little bit of what SEO, of what outdoorsy is. We are a marketplace for renting RVs or motorhomes or camper vans or whatever they're called around. There are different names in different parts of the world. So we have a site. Part of our site is really needs to be fast for people to find and search for RVs. And so what I'm talking about is that part of our application. Okay, so we need SEO stuff, we need social sharing, we need it to load fast and to stay fast, and we need it to be maintainable. It needs to be something that we're not trying to hack together as we're trying to add new features and trying to make this thing more efficient for the work that we're trying to do. And why? Why do we need to go fast? Why do we need our sites to load fast? Anybody want to? We all know that if sites don't load fast, then our users leave. And in Ember world, this has been an issue for us for a while. And we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do that. So sites loading quickly, users getting to usable content and seeing stuff that's worthwhile and interesting and why they are there to see our site is important for us and our work that have apps that are facing the public. Okay. So, load fast for us. This means SSR, which is server-side rendering, and then there's a whole notion of data fetching, and then rehydration and lazy loading. We're going to look at each one of those a little bit more. So, in the Ember world, we have this thing called Fastboot. Fastboot's been talked about for a long time, which is a simple way for us to start server-side rendering our applications. Who's using it with their apps? Anybody? Yeah? Is it going well? How's it going? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit about the tech of it, or the pieces that make that up. It's in Node land, so it's on a Node server. Ember's running there. There's an API to visit a URL, and then as you visit that URL, it will spin up the stuff inside the Ember app, and you get back HTML. Yeah. It uses simple DOM to put the site together. It's not actual browser DOM in quite the same way. I'll show you a little bit about that later. There's a few add-ons here that you can use on the server to help you get your stuff going. For us, we're using S3. We have a little Node server that we're using the Ember app Fastboot, which is just a little middleware, a Node middleware express it's an express app that has a little bit of middleware. We're using that. There's other add-ons to just notify that application when you've uploaded your application. It's a little bit of stuff there. We can talk more about the details. There's been quite a few talks about Fastboot, so I don't want to go. We can go as much as you'd like to get into here on this side of things. Okay, I want to talk about data loading states. What are the steps to get an app going? Well, first of all, let's make a recap of how does a normal Ember app load or start. Anybody want to throw out some ideas? How does this work?
You give it your index file, and it's got references to the JavaScript payloads and CSS.
Okay, and then what happens next?
The browser pulls those down and parses the payload, and then some kind of magic happens.
Okay, and then what's the next thing happens after that?
The app instance gets started.
The app instance gets started, sure. Next thing that happens?
Like thing inside of the app, like the app initializers or whatever.
Sure, app initializers start to happen. There's a big thing that happens next.
The user sees something.
Well, there's a little bit before the user sees something. For a normal data fetching, there's a point. So what happens is the index.html comes down, then there are JavaScripts there that are sent out and grabs the JavaScripts, downloads that, and then Ember boots up. And then there's boot time that goes through that, and then after that, an AJAX request is made. And then your components are hydrated or given data to then render the right things on the page. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's how a normal out-of-the-box Ember app works. For most of us, that's probably how our apps work. So the data loading for SSR, how would this work? Well, there are 3 places that data needs to be fetched. And when you're server-side rendering an application, the first one is server-side. What do you think the next one is that you would need to worry about when you're server-side rendering your application? The next one is the first client load. Okay, so we were just talking about that with your Ember app. You've got your JavaScript load, your app, you get to your route. Your route is then fetching some data. So that is an AJAX request off to a server to go get that data. So we need to worry, if you're worrying about data loading, you need to worry about what's happening on the server. You need to worry about what's happening on that first request if you're wanting to go fast. And then the next one is all the rest of those requests. Okay? So does that make sense? Why you need to worry about that first? So the reason why you want to worry about that first load is you want it to go fast. You don't want your app to boot up on... so you've got your server-side rendered app. You've got your page, your index.html now has all of the HTML in the page. You don't want your app then, Ember, as it's booting up, to go make a new request for data. It's going to slow your page down. You want the data for that first request somewhere close to your application. Okay? Does that make sense? But then you need to worry about what's the subsequent requests. Does it use the same data from that request that's in the page? I can see I need to explain that a little bit more. So with Fastboot, there's a notion of a shoebox. And which is a way, with Fastboot, shoebox comes as a technology of Fastboot, which is a way to put data into that first page render, so that the first request for data can look into the page for that data instead of going off to a server to get it. Does that make sense? So this is a place to stuff the data that's needed for that first render to be in the page so that you can render that page as quickly as possible. Because we're on the server, we've made a request in our Node server to render the page. We've already requested the data on the Node server, so we want to get that. We just want to serialize that data we've used to request to draw our pages on the server, and we want to just stuff that into that initial page load. So as it gets down to the client, boom, everything's there. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's another. I call it index stuffing. I've talked about this quite a bit. I've actually done talks at the Ember Seattle thing, but I never recorded them and put them out. I was always too nervous. But there's a thing I've been talking about for a long time called index stuffing. So like we're talking about with our Ember apps, we have that first index.html that's sent down to the client. And I think there's oftentimes a place for us to push some data into that that would help get our app up and running without making a new request. Okay, so Valent just had put out a blog post about this. In his application, they have a whole bunch of destinations. It's a tourist app, and they have these destinations that they don't change very often. But as their Ember app loaded in the past, it would go make this request for this destinations, but it never it needed it for every page load, but it didn't change very often. So basically, the user requests the page, they sit and wait for this data to come back from the server, and then they render the page. So this is a great opportunity to just stuff the index.html with some data that will make your page load faster and not have to make as many requests for data. So he's got a great example of how he's doing it there. If you're booting your app from a Rails app, back when I was working at Urban Spoon, we would stuff our data into the page. We'd just serialize a model as JSON and then have the first request for data that would be going out, look at that. If it is the first request, use the data from the page. If not, keep going back to the server. Does that make sense? I think it's something we don't do enough of, which I think we could make our apps faster.
Are there other best practices you look at when you're thinking about what you should inline and what you shouldn't, other than just how often does this thing change?
I think if you do have, if your app is mainly about a user, stuffing your user in there is worthwhile. If your app, the slash of your app is basically a user after that, you can put that user in there as fast as possible. Is good. Yeah. And then anything like categories or, yeah. I asked some guy who was putting together a PhoneGap app. I'm like, do you put anything in your app as you send it over the wire to people? Oh, no, we never thought of that. So I think that's another place. As you're bundling that sort of thing up to send off to the App Store, put as much data in there as you can. And if it does take another deployment to change it, I think it's worthwhile. I think it's something that you can think about. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for Belinda, he was talking about every day they have exchange rates that they put into their app. And that was too often for them, for it changing, that they thought we need to make an API request for that data. Okay, so one thing that's great that I love about the Ember community is we work around with a whole bunch of ideas for how we fetch this data, and then we sort of come to a consensus of a way to do it that can be shared across all of us who are doing this sort of thing. And here's a great example of that. Before this, we were using something that Edward Faulkner had written. We forked it off of him because it didn't quite do all the stuff we needed to do. You should have seen the code that we were using to try and manage that request on the server, that first initial request, and then requests after that. But this Ember Cashew has made that super simple. And so now all we're doing, this is an adapter, and we're just passing in a mixin. And what this mixin does is as it's serializing into your data into the shoebox, it MD5 hashes the request that's being made and the query strings that would be on it, and puts that into the page. And it looks to see, as those requests are going out through the adapter back to the server, do I have that in the shoebox? If I do, return that. It's great. It's super easy. I think the payload there can be a little larger than what you would manage yourself, but for maintainability, this is super easy. Something we ripped out a ton of code when we were able to add this. Okay, rehydration. Who knows what rehydration is?
I'm sorry, I have one question.
Well, you put your hand up, so you have to answer.
Rehydration is taking the HTML and basically making Ember connect to the DOM.
Sure.
So that Ember is now engaged with the DOM that's on the page.
Sure.
So I have a question about Shoebox.
Okay. Shoebox.
So do you manage? So you manage what goes into Shoebox. Does it delete after the first time you go get it, or is it there all the time? Like, do you have to manage that manually?
Someone pushed up a commit that did delete it. Okay. We don't want it deleted. I think if we've got the data, let's use the data that we have. Okay. If we're making a new request, then let's go get that data. I don't think, yeah, that's my thought on it. I don't think it adds any extra weight in the page. Okay. But if we can use that data, let's use that data. But it's already in the store, and if it's in the store and there's a request made, then let's just use what we have in the store as well. So basically, it's a way to put it into the cache, and let's use our cache,
so
the Ember data cache.
Ember data?
Yes, yes.
Is there a way to bust the cache?
The cache can be bussed with a query string for sure. If you change the query string, then you would be making a request off to your server. Yep.
Thanks.
Is that good? Okay, so rehydration. Rehydration isn't just an Ember thing. It's something that React's been doing for a little while. But I'm glad it's been good for us. And so basically rehydration is, at the moment, the way that Fastboot works is that as the page is loaded, it's drawn onto the page. So your server-side rendered, you've got the HTML on the page, it's drawn. Ember takes that time to boot up. And then as Ember boots, it then redraws the whole page. So there's a bit of a flash there. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what rehydration will do is just start to look through the DOM. So it goes through the trees in the DOM and looks at what components I have. Are they exactly the same as what I was going to draw? Okay, we don't need to draw them, just throw that out. And keeps going through. If there are places that need to be redrawn, because the data is now different, I have a user now in the first boot of the page, then I'll redraw that. I'll throw out what I had that's in the page and I'll redraw that bit. Yeah, and rehydration is super easy. Robert Jackson and Jonathan Jackson, actually Jonathan with Robert. Jonathan is Robert's brother. Anyway, Jonathan did a great job doing this. Yehuda a long time ago added rehydration to Glimmer, but it hadn't come into Emberland until around EmberConf time. It's still behind an experimental flag, and you need these dependencies to run it. Ember, the Fastboot has been on that beta 1 for a long time. I think it could easily be gone over to, I think actually Jonathan told me yesterday that it's actually at 1.2. So Fastboot is at 1.2, so you don't have to be on a beta. So if you're using Fastboot 1.2, you can pass this flag to it and you'll have a rehydrated app. And it's that easy. So on our node server that is serving our index.html, we have to pass in this flag. It's pretty easy for us to do that, just to do an environment flag on our server as it's booting up to then have this rehydration. That's it. That's what you came for? There's a little bit more. So, yeah, thank you. Really, is it worth it?
It is.
Okay. So I'm just going to go through these. There's some tips here that I found. Yeah, we'll just go through each one of these. So one thing I played around with for us is trying to figure out how to make to make it as fast as possible. Where should I have the JavaScript in the page? And I've tried a bunch of things, putting it at the top of the page, deferring it. I had some JavaScript that would then load it later, like after a timeout. There's a tool by Google called Lighthouse. And that was one of the numbers that the powers that be at our company wanted that number to be as high as possible. I will show you some of that. I've got some examples to show you. Anyway, the default place where the JavaScripts are is the right place for them to be. One thing we also did was concatenate there are normally two different CSS files. There's a vendor file and an app file. We concatenated those together to make it less requests there. I think the JavaScripts are too big to do that together. Maybe when we can really split up our apps, maybe it would be better to have that as one request. Anyway, I say here, move around the scripts. You don't really need to. What happens is that in that content for body is where Fastboot will render your application. Your JavaScripts will be at the bottom of the page. So your page is drawn, your CSS comes in at the top of the page, the HTML is there, the page is drawn, the JavaScript's loaded, then rehydration happens. Does that make sense? Can everyone do that with me? No, you don't have to do that with me. One of the things that Glimmer does to help with rehydration is it puts markers in the HTML to know where each DOM tree starts and finishes. So it's actually putting comments into the page. We can have a look at that later on. One of the things that happens is because of the title tag in the head of your application is allowed to have comments in it, and they could be rendered. Glimmer puts comments into the title tag. So you need a system to get around that. And basically what we're doing here is just passing an HTML safe tag to the page, and this gets around that. This is definitely something we want to fix for everybody, that people don't have to worry about it. There are, if anybody wants to do some work on some open source, I can show exactly where this work is in Glimmer that you could go and help with this. But that's definitely something you'll see. You'll see a flash at the top of your page in the title tag where you'll see an angle bracket. I can show you what the tags look like. And then it flashes back as your app loads. Okay, responsiveness. We're server-side rendering our applications, and in Fastboot, that's normally a desktop version of your app. So there's an add-on called Ember Responsive, which allows you to say, is this mobile, or is this a tablet, or is this a desktop? And we're able to change things around on our pages. And we're often, obviously this is happening in JavaScript land, but it's looking at media queries to find that out. And on Node land, you don't have that. So we need to be much more careful about how we're managing our responsiveness. And we really should be doing all of that in CSS as much as possible. Does that make sense? We need to get out of trying to do it in JavaScript land. Here, this is some of our code. We have a map on one of our pages, and here we're hiding it with some CSS, and we're only wanting to draw it if we are on a desktop. So we could be loading something for a user who's on a phone that we don't really want to be loading. So as the page is booted up, the HTML that's in the page needs to be able to render on a phone and on a desktop. Does that make sense? Or we could cache different versions. You can pass a flag to Fastboot to say, I want it to be rendered at this size. I want you to think about the app at this size, and go through that, and you could split off a cache there. Okay, another thing is this. Yeah.
Talk about later, but do you guys do much caching?
We will talk about that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. Yes. So this tip is really important also for just if you're not rehydrating but you're just using Fastboot. This is something that's really important. That you in your browser you turn off your JavaScript and you actually see what is there in the page in that initial load. There's oftentimes your site will flash over because we're using JavaScript to manage how things look for the phone and for the desktop. Then you can see a flash in the page. Things are changing because the HTML that was there was for the desktop, and we need to look at it without our JavaScript turned on. Yeah, does that make sense? We can always go back and look at examples. Here's another thing that's really interesting, I think. This is one thing that bit us in the butt. Is that you need to use valid HTML. And because we're working in JavaScript land, we can often easily write invalid JavaScript. So what we have here, let me just rerun this. So what we have here is we have an A tag up in the top there with a div, and then we have another A tag inside of it. What do you think the browser does to that? If you pass that code to the browser, how does it render it? Does anybody know?
Strip the div.
It does. It actually strips the div and puts it down below the A tag. So here you can see we can turn on the JavaScript here. And run it again. So in the bottom here, this JavaScript is actually making those DOM nodes itself, and then putting it in the page. And as you can see by the CSS up here, you can see that this invalid HTML is now rendered with this right CSS. Does that make sense? There's another example here. This is with a p tag. And it's the same thing. That div will be pulled out and put below the HTML. The div will be put below the p tag. And obviously you can see by the CSS that you get different results. Okay, so if we go back to this other example, someone said you could just run a linter over your app and go, hey, this is bad. But because we use components, this is so easy to do. You can imagine the inside anchor tag as a component, and you'd need to see the app actually rendered before you could do any manipulation there. I think this is an issue in React as well as for anybody doing server-side rendering. You're going to have some issues there. Okay, and this came up for us as I turned off the JavaScript. I look at the page and I'm like, oh, it's laying out pretty weird. Why is that? When we turn JavaScript on, boom, it pops back in, and you're like, oh, what is going on? It took me ages to figure this one out. But I want to say thank you to Chris Selden, because he was the first person to point it out to me. So when we're back into how to load your app fast and stay fast. One of the issues with that is the number of requests that are made on a page. For us, we are showing a number of RVs and pictures of RVs on a page, and we want to make sure that first request is as fast as possible. So we don't want to load things below the fold. So we need to lazy load the pieces below. There are a few add-ons in the Ember ecosystem that are for this type of thing. There's an Ember lazy load image that you can pass in a flag to, and it will look at the way that it's written is that it uses the intersection API, which is mainly in Chrome, and then it polyfills that with request animation frame to then decide where in the page it is, and it will then render the image. We have loads of images. This was not working for us. As I was instrumenting the application and looking at the performance data, you could see that there was a request animation frame being called a lot on the page because we were using this lazy image all over the place. So it's not efficient. And as you are running tests to see how fast your page is running, one of the things that test does is looks at the main JavaScript thread and sees when does that stop. Or, okay, I'm done. I don't want to wait any longer. Okay, we're going to give you whatever that time is. I think it's 20 seconds. And we'll just cut it off there and say something's going on. You get 0. So, lazy loading, one of the things we're doing is we're wrapping areas of our page. And as that area reaches the DOM, reaches the viewport, then we pass a flag to other things to then say, okay, render now. So there's less requests that are being made. Less things watching the scroll bar and watching the viewport. Does that make sense? I think that there's a place here, we need to do something better here. So there's an add-on called Ember in Viewport. That's okay. And then there's some stuff that LinkedIn is using called it's called Spaniel or Ember Spaniel. And I think we can do some stuff there that we can be much more efficient in. And I think that that's something as a community we could be looking at. But lazy loading is a thing that you need to be thinking about to make your site go fast. Okay, Fastboot testing. Yeah, there's some people, again, that have made really great things simple for us. The second one here is Ember Tailwind. This is something that the Ember Map guys have done. They've got a Fastboot test there that's in a way that they like to set things up. We have found Ember Fastboot app tests to be super simple, and it looks like this. We're running Mocha tests for these. We So basically here we're just using the visit API in Nodeland and visit URL, and then basically we get back a response and it's the HTML of the page, and then you can assert against that. So we don't have a ton of tests here. It's just making sure that we're getting the right parts of the page. We're looking in the shoebox. Do we get the pieces in the shoebox we're wanting? We also are using Circle CI for our CI stuff, and we're able to split this off. So we're able to run our Ember tests on one side and our Fastboot tests at the same time in parallel. These tests do take longer, but it's pretty simple to be testing your Fastboot side of your app now. Make sense?
How do you know that this is the Fastboot world and not the regular world? Are there just all these tests only in the Fastboot world?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a folder of Fastboot tests, and it's using this. It's using that visit API instead of using. We have visit as well and the Ember side, but this is using the visit API of Fastboot.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are taking 3 seconds or so to run, to boot up. Some of them are 6 seconds. One thing I should say is Fastboot is not fast on the server. Fastboot is not fast. Fastboot is not fast. So these are the things we've talked about: server-side rendering, data fetching, rehydration, and lazy loading. And then the one we brought up earlier is cache. Cache. We could not be running our site in Fastboot if we weren't caching our pages. So we've made decisions that we're not going to do anything for the user, that we have no cookie or any auth happening on our Fastboot servers. And we're serving the parts of our site that are used for search, for people searching for RVs or trying to rent an RV. As soon as we get to a place that people are trying to get into our shopping cart, then we stop fastbooting and we'll load Ember in the typical way of the index.html and boot the app. So our technologies we're using, we've been using Varnish and Nginx to split out pieces there and to redirect pieces into the right places. We have to have mechanisms for breaking that cache. We've got to a point that some of our pages we can have up for 30 days. And some of our stuff is a little bit less than that. And recently we've moved over to Fastly. And they have some great stuff. That obviously the cache is then done way on the edge out in the world. We've just launched in Australia and New Zealand. We want to be caching those pages over there. Also, Fastly has some ways for us to inject things as the cache, as on the edge, we're able to put things into the page for an individual. So we want to utilize some things there. We're thinking about serving less minified Ember for the things that we can be passing down. So New Chrome could be getting a much smaller application because we're not having to go through a Babel setup there. So we're going to look at that. Yeah. Lucas did that work. If you want to talk to Lucas. And there's another thing called Preember, which there's a bunch of guys talking about that. This is at build time, you're caching your pages. So pages that if it's not backed by data, and like your About Us page or some other pages like that, or your blog, you could easily be doing it in Preember and put it up. I think it's pretty simple for the Preember stuff to add rehydration into it. It just needs a flag added to the right place. But Preember could be rehydrated in the same way. Sure. Okay, outdoorsy. This is outdoorsy. This is, yeah. What's that?
Is that near Joshua Tree?
It is near Joshua Tree. Oh, really?
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So, outdoorsy, we have two main apps. I've talked about them a little bit, our search app and our dashboard app. Our dashboard app is for owners and renters and the connections they made there and where people check out, where communication happens, where people manage the multiple RVs that they own is in that in that app. Our stack, we have 3 big apps. We have those 2 apps. We have another app that we have for professionals, guys that have, or companies that have multiple RVs, some hundreds of RVs. We have an app for them to run their business in. It's called Wheelbase. It's been great for us to have that other side of this business. So then we share 2 main add-ons. One is that has all our models and adapters and serializers that we share between all 3 of those applications. Then we have another add-on that's more of our CSS and some components that we use for the outdoorsy side of things. We have some more stuff there as well, and we have issues and dependency stuff that we're trying to work out, whether we go to a mono repo or something. If anybody knows how a mono repo works, I would love to talk with you. But it's been a lot of fun to build up this thing and to be working on something that really is working. It's been fun. So we have some JSON API pieces, and we've got some of our Ember data models that have no root node. It's just a JSON. It's JSON with Ember likes to have a root node to know what type it is. We don't have that. We have a lot of adapters. We'd like to, when you're working in a business that's working and going fast, you've got to decide where the pieces are that you need to be working on and running with. Anyway, our backend's in Go. We have a little bit of Java that we've started to do. We've got a little bit of Python to do other things. But this is our stack. Do you want to see it? Is it worth seeing? Okay. So this is our search site. This is the search part of the application. Basically, when you get to /dashboard, that is when we flip over to the other side. And the reason we had to do that is because it's too big of an application to be put in one bundle. We need things to go fast. So we decided to make a split there.
Have you guys looked at engines?
We have looked at engines. We actually have an engine as well. We have a checkout flow that's in an engine. We could talk about that if you want. So this is, let's go back here. So this is the home page. So I refreshed the home page. There's no white screen here. It's just is there. One of the other things, you say, hey Dave, you're talking about load fast, stay fast. We have some web fonts here. And this is really important to the brand. This is not good for us going fast. I have a friend. I have lunch with Chris Selden once in a while up in Seattle, and he's like, Dave, why are we talking about speed if you got this web font? Why are we talking about speed if you got this web font? So I get it, and I understand brand as well. So let's have a look at the page source here. So this is what I was talking about with these.
That font size up a few times, please.
So this is what I'm talking about with these glimmer rehydration markers. Does this make sense? There are markers throughout the DOM so that Glimmer knows so it basically knows the tree that you're going through and where to render and when to throw away DOM and when to re-render the DOM. Does that make sense? So this is one way to know that you've got rehydration turned on. So obviously we have all of the HTML for the page, and if we scroll down here a little bit, we'll get to the part where the shoebox shows up, and here's our shoebox. So this is all the data we have to render this page. Does that make sense? Some things that we can do here to make this faster is to make one request for all of this data. And there's some other pieces we could be doing here to really streamline this. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I go back here, we'll reset this. So here is an example. If I take this down to a mobile view, let's pop this back inside and so you can see I'm really trying hard with that web font. It's different from the default font that is there, and what is drawn on the page is from the default font. So I'm trying to space things out in a way that this thing doesn't move around very much between the non-JavaScript side and the JavaScript side. Let's have a quick look at that as well. I'm going to turn off the JavaScript here. Wrong button. So if we render this, that is what it looks like without JavaScript turned on. And we turn it back on. Do you see how that's rehydrating there? There's some pieces down in the page that are even more interesting. Let's actually go to a different page. Let's go to Colorado. Did you see where it rehydrated? Did it jump around? The movement there is more the font coming in than the rehydration. You can see here the lazy loading that's happening. Images are lazy loading into the page. And like I was saying, there is a section here where I have the in viewport. I've got it's actually right here at this point as it comes into the page. I just have a component there, and it knows when it gets into the page and passes a flag down. Okay, do what you want. We're in the viewport, and then we keep it that way. Once you're in, you're in. We don't watch it going out. If you're watching it going out, you've got a lot of things watching, a lot of events to watch the DOM. So we have a section down here that would be interesting to look at with JavaScript turned off. Reloaded. Sorry, I clicked on something here. This was a section. This is the section I found that issue with the A tags inside the A tags. This whole section was just foobarred. And no, they say fucked, I may think. So we really had to rearrange our components to make sure that this would render correctly. So if you look at the performance timeline, you can watch when the first page renders, and you can see all the rendering that happens there. Then you can see Ember booting up, and then Ember trying to re-render that. And if you have a lot of repainting at that point, you've got something going on at that part of the page that you need to think about, because that is affecting the time to first interaction. Okay? We have made some decisions on some pages. So we have a search page. One thing with JavaScript turned off is live reload. This doesn't happen. Thanks, Lucas. Maybe I didn't. Okay, so this page here, we've made a decision. This isn't as important for SEO for us. So this page, we've made a decision to only render a little bit of the page. We're basically, the fast booting on this page and the rehydration is only a shell. And it's basically just our header here. So again, if I turn off JavaScript, should figure out how to do this quickly. So it's F1, right? F1. And you have to keep this open. If you close this, then the JavaScript turns back on. So we can see it's only this part of the page. So this is the part that we're caching and serving to people, and then the rest of the part of the page will come in as Ember is doing its thing. I think...
Is it fairly easy to decide, like, so I'm assuming that's a route, right? So when you're, like, are you deciding what to fast food at the route level, at the component level, like how does that work?
We will do it as high as possible, sure. As high as needed. So definitely throughout, if you're using Fastboot in your app, you're definitely using, is this Fastboot, is this not Fastboot? Is this Fastboot or not? There's a lot of that throughout your code. And you're saying, okay, I don't want this to happen at this point. I want that to happen only on the client. Yeah. And some of that is around some functionality, like this map here. We don't want this to load at all, and on the Fastboot side. Well, it can't. It's all using the window. So we can't do anything there. So there's a lot of conditionals to say, hey, this is in node land and this is not. And because we have two applications, one is Fastbooted and one is not, we look up on the owner whether the owner has Fastboot or not, and then we say, okay, Fastboot, we have the Fastboot service in this component. We use the owner for that. We can look at some code there. This is another page we have cached. We have this page cached for a long time, up to 30 days, right? So if the owner doesn't make any changes to this page, then we can just keep this cached for a long time. There's one big issue with that, though. Anybody know what an issue with this being cached for a long time is?
They make changes.
What's that?
They make changes.
If they make changes. Another part is that we deploy our app often. So now this is an old version of our app. We're going to have multiple versions of our app out in the wild. So it's something to think about. We've thought about it. We don't have a lot of solutions for that, but it is an issue. Like what?
Where is the cache on the CDN or other system?
We are using Varnish. Okay, first of all, we had Varnish right next to our server. We're using Varnish there. So basically, any requests from around that server was in New York. So anything near near New York was fast. If you're even in Silicon Valley, you're going all the way there to get our cache. And right now, we're moving our stuff over to Fastly. Some of our site is in Fastly. Some of it's still on that cache.
They should have ways to invalidate pages based on URIs, right? Like you could have a list of things you want to invalidate.
Sure. We have a CLI tool that we can say, I want to invalidate this URL. We have other pieces where, the other bit for that is now we have multiple domains. We need to blow that away on multiple domains also. But then we want to blow away some stuff. If we're putting up a new A/B test or some other feature, we need to blow away the cache for a lot of people. This means that now pages are slow for a little while. So there's some give and take there. Okay. So, and then I was talking about our dashboard site. This is our dashboard. It's a dashboard and it works, and it's people are renting their vehicles to each other. It's really quite amazing. Anything else you'd like to see here? Okay, let me show you some tools here. Okay, so this here, someone put together a little super basic Ember application to show rehydration. And this is that application. I've got it running here. I've got it running without live reload. And I'm going to use a tool that it's called Lighthouse. This comes in all your browsers. It's in the audit tab right here. And so I'm going to run this Lighthouse and see what a basic Ember app, what numbers you get back from a basic Ember app. Obviously, you saw I just had the performance part checked. That's really the only thing you... there are helpful things in other places, but if you're working on your score, you only need to look at the performance tab. So this is a super basic Ember app, and it's getting an 87. So this is really what the ultimate you could be going towards. At EmberConf, the guys from 201 Created put together this little application. using a lot of the latest stuff. And I've got it running here as well. Let's have a look at this. This is a super basic application. It looks nice here. Let's look at the numbers and then I'll talk about what's going on. So this has all the data it needs for the site in the page. It also has the CSS jammed into the head of the application, and it's getting a 91. So that super simple app and this app, I think it's because Lighthouse is a black box. I don't know how it all works. I would love someone to explain all of it. But
I think those extra 9 points are reserved for Angular.
For Angular, sure. There you go.
You sure it's not React?
Someone's funny. Yeah, I need to try that out. Okay, so let's so I'm not totally lying to you fellas. Let's have a look at where I really should have had what we had beforehand and what we have now. But let's have a look at this page. This is one of our main landing pages that we're sending a lot of traffic to. Our SEO guys and our SEM guys are sending people here. And we wanted this to be as fast as we can, as fast as it can. And I'll show you where we're at. Anybody want to predict the numbers?
83.
83? Anybody else? 83? Nobody wants to be brave?
85.
85.
98.
98. Oh, mate. Somebody's... Okay, so this...
It's actually
Somebody's confident ass.
Yeah. Oh, obviously...
Also, there's still tons of food left,
Yeah.
guys. Please go up and get more food.
I should say a little bit about Lighthouse. What Lighthouse does is it slows down the internet connection. It slows down the speed of the browser. So it has a bunch of things to constrain your application so that it can have a pretty predictable number time after time. And it's pretty predictable time after time. So 35.
They switched it.
I have a question regards this. It looks like you're loading more than 1 megabyte for this specific page. It is Lighthouse showed it on the line.
Which part?
Size. Overall for this page.
The size of it?
Yeah, it's 1 megabyte. Do you think that you
Sure. So 5. It is. You're right.
Yeah, so my question, like, did you try to lower the bundle just for the initial loading, or maybe even for concurrent loading? Just try to any technique just to make this file smaller, because this is the one of the best techniques right now to speed up the loading.
For sure. And what you're talking about is really, really important. And as a community, we don't have a solution for that. As the Ember community is lacking in that spot right now. There are 2 people working on it. Kelly Selden is working on more of a roll-up notion. So to try, some of our add-ons have things we're not using and we need to be stripping that stuff out. That isn't happening right now. I don't know if you know that. If you pull in an add-on and it's not used in your application, all of that add-on is still in your app.
Still there.
So there's that part that needs to be ripped out. And then there's the code splitting part of it.
My question mostly about outdoors. It's not about the Ember ecosystem. Like, did you try to do anything with outdoorsy?
With Outdoorsy, specifically to try and cut those things down, we've gone through our app and pulled things out as much as we can. We had some animation. We're using Liquid Fire early on. We don't do that anymore. We've pulled out as much as we can. I think we could do more of an audit on some things we're not using and actually exclude that, to be more specific in our build to exclude pieces. But the biggest problem is how big Ember is. That, I shouldn't say biggest problem. We need all that to run all the pieces. But that's one of the problems. And I appreciate all the guys working on this.
Okay, I have an idea. It's about like similar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just having one application and development, Ember application, and then based on it build some kind of just static pages. Because
Sure.
For most pages, it has almost no JavaScript. Just trying to achieve it.
Exactly. A lot of the stuff we're doing here is for that next page. So we're loading a lot to get to the next page.
We need some kind of balance.
There would be great to have some sort of balance. We are looking at moving some more stuff to static pages, but we do want, the guys that are working on that have come back to us just recently and said, we want that interaction, we want that map, we want that searching to happen as well. So there's this piece, how do we manage those two?
You can say like product team is pushing development team.
Sure. But those are the requests that we have to deal with. We have to figure those things out. We would like to lazy load things some more. When I was working at Twitch, we had some ways of pulling pieces out that we would lazy load in later, but it was very manual and it worked for the needs we had. We didn't want people looking at our stuff, so we needed to hide it. Yeah. Okay, going back to our slides, there's a bunch of things that we are doing at Outdoorsy that we need help. We want people to help us out. One thing I'm enjoying about working there is we're putting money in people's pockets, and that's been really fun. To see guys making 25 grand over a summer, renting out their RV. One kid who's renting out their family's RV that had been sitting in their lot for a long time said, I'm just going to start doing this myself, and he's putting money away for his college fund. To see other guys starting out businesses, they get one RV and two RVs, and like, this is working, I should get a bunch more. We really want to help people get outside. We also want to help people utilize their vehicles. We have a pretty cool date picker that we've written, totally ripped off the Airbnb React date picker, but we haven't been able to open source it yet. And we would love some people to help us do that. We have a couple of other things too that we'd love to open source, but we're frantically trying to get our site going. So people that just took new jobs in new places, I don't know what you're doing. I don't understand. Yeah, we would love to have you helping us out. I think we're working on really cool stuff. Trying to, I think if I'm right, there's not many people using Rehydration now. I'd love to know. I'm on Ember Community Slack. I'm under that word that we talked about, Kiwi Abogo. I would love to hear more. I'd love to hear more tips. We would love this stuff to be going faster than what it is. There were some very hopeful people over here saying great numbers, and we would love that.
Well, it's like, what if you just load Ember after the HTML?
Load Ember after?
Yeah,
I've done that, where we just drew the page and then waited for a while, and I wasn't getting a whole bunch more better numbers. I think there's something about the main thread. I don't know. Maybe I'm not doing it as well as I could. Maybe I'm just not good.
It was just
What are you trying to say? I'm trying to expose.
Also, you all got a pretty sweet office over on East. So just throwing that out there.
We just put up we're building a brand new place as well, just south of the river.
Riverside.
You got a great
Riverside? What's that? I live in Seattle, and our office is here. I work out of a WeWork aquarium. I have a little glass room that people watch me from. So just to finish off here, some things that we can do as a community are these. One is, I think the critical path CSS is a really big deal. That we are only putting in the page the CSS to draw what's in the viewport. And I think there's some ways we can do that. There are some NPM modules that we can use to do that. I think that as a community we could do this. I had this other one is remove whitespace just to make that index.html that is coming down. That first load, that page, we can strip out all of the whitespace and probably take out a lot of weight from that index.html file. And I believe that the guys at Simple Labs have an add-on for this. We need to improve lazy loading. We need better ways to manage what's in the viewport and what's not. I think that people that are loading ads on your pages need to do this as well. There's something there with Spaniel from LinkedIn that would be good, but we need better lazy loading. That is as a whole.
as your app in your domain, you need to think about your own apps. Where could we load things? What's the most important pieces that need to be loaded? What can be loaded second? What's some ancillary information that could be done from a server instead of through that initial page load? What needs to be drawn right away? What could be drawn later? And then, just like we were talking about down here, what can we do to split down to bring down our app size so that we're using the things that the things that we need for that first drawer? Yeah, I think that's all I have. I think so. Thanks, and there's I'm queued up over at.